So yeah, welcome everybody to this morning's masterclass. I'm delighted to be joined by Debra Corey, who would have been with us yesterday in the master's program. We were scheduled to have that yesterday, and as many of you know, it's an integral part really of the master's program is to be able to come together as companies for our learning. But the good news now is that we're obviously, with the likes of Zoom, we're able to bring our thought leaders to the boardrooms. Debra is a seasoned HR professional, having worked in the space for over 20 years with organizations like Gap, Merlin Entertainment, and luckily her company Reward Gateway. Now, beautiful title of the Chief Pay It Forward Officer. I'm sure Debra is going to open up a bit more about that in a second. But I really sort of came to see Debra's work just over 12 months ago when we brought the co-author of Build It, the Rebel Playbook for World-Class Employee Engagement, into the SMP, the Master's Program last year. And Debra is a co-author of that book with Glenn, and has recently also just written, probably very timely now, Bring Your Values Out to Play. And no doubt Debra is going to be focusing on that as well today. And I think our other book on communication. So three books that Debra's written. And so really looking forward to learning very, very pertinently right now, how do we make sure that we are on point when it not only comes to employee engagement, but also making sure that we are staying true to our values. So just a few rules of the game. If I may, I think most of you have just got on silent right now, but if you've got any questions to ask at all as we go through that, please put those in the chat button. I'll be keeping a good eye on the chat button, or any queries. We're going to be running a number of polls throughout the session today, so I'll be running that bit, so hopefully that goes to plan. But it just gives an area that we can interact with one another. And talking about interaction, we're going to go into a number of breakout rooms as well, just like we would do if we were working in the classroom. We'd probably be spending a few minutes just figuring out what that little bit of learning can apply in our company. So we want to make sure we continue to do that. And finally, just make sure that you take really good notes. There's going to be a whole wealth of learning through today. Timings wise, we're going to take a break in about an hour, just around about 10:30, just to make sure everyone can stretch their legs, and comfort break around 10:30. And then we will be looking to sort of wrap everything up just before 11:30. So without further ado, Debra, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much. So interestingly, when Neil and I first spoke about me talking, I was going to talk specifically about the book that you mentioned, Build It, and talk about employee engagement. But since life threw us all a curveball or two, which if anybody doesn't know American baseball, that's when the ball doesn't come right to you when you're batting. So I've sort of changed today. So we're still going to be talking about employee engagement, but what I've tried to do is adapt it to some of the challenges and some of the interesting perspectives that we have right now when it comes to this new world. So what can we do right now? And then also some thoughts on how is it going to impact employee engagement in the future. As far as my title, Neil asked me what my title is. When I started my own little company a year ago, the reason I started it is because I really wanted to take everything that I've learned over I said 20 years, Neil, but I'm amongst friends. I've actually been doing it for 30 years. I know I don't look that old, but there you go. And I wanted to share all the things that I've learned, right or wrong. So actually my first book that I wrote on communications is pretty much filled of everything that I've done wrong throughout my career in communicating to people. So I'm more than happy to share these so that you don't make the same mistakes, but then also learn all the things that I've picked up over the years, either personally or the great thing about writing, if anyone ever wants to write a book, is it gives you permission to just be nosy and talk to people about what they're doing. So all of my books have what we call plays, which are case studies. So I've spoken to hundreds of companies about what they're doing. So again, hopefully I can pay that forward with all of you guys as well. So this is what we're going to be covering today. I wanted to start out really high level and just talk about how do we need to redefine employee engagement. I've been thinking a lot about it as we've sort of been moving on throughout COVID-19, and how do we need to redefine it. And then I wanted to specifically pick up on 5 areas. So again, if we were normally getting together, I'd be talking about 10 areas of the employee engagement bridge. But today I'm going to focus specifically on 5. Hopefully, these are the ones that you guys are dealing with, but we've got time at the end. So if there's other areas that you guys are really having challenges with, by all means, jot them down and we can talk about them. The 5 are values. I wanted to start with values, then move into communications. Well-being. Well-being has gotten more and more important, especially during lockdown. Ramping up recognition, and then finally the changing roles of managers. But before I do that, what I wanted to do is sort of zoom out for a minute. I didn't realize we'd be on Zoom. Zoom out on Zoom and just talk about some of the things that are impacting all of us. And I think I've got 5 things listed here. The first is that we're all in it together. We hear that phrase all the time. I don't know about you, I'm sort of sick of it, because yes, we are all in it together, but as this silly picture is, we're all very different. So if I just look at all of your companies, so Neil's told me about all of your different companies, I'm sure that as a business, you're all facing different challenges. We have some similar challenges, but then we also have very different challenges. So the great thing about this crisis is that we're going through it together. So hopefully we can support each other, give each other ideas. But at the end of the day, we need to respect that we're all different rubber ducks in the equation. The other thing we need to do is that we need to respect where people are. And this is where I'm going to go more into the people side. And I don't know if you guys have seen this either through your friends or at work. But again, I've been on these types of calls where, you know, everyone gets together to support each other. And everyone's just trying to say that we're all in the same place. And we are not all in the same place. You know, different people are dealing with different types of struggles, different types of challenges. So even when I talk about employee engagement, I'm generalizing. So I think it's important to respect and understand where each of your people are. And then similarly, respect the different hurdles that people are facing. I mean, it's quite amusing being on some of these calls. You know, I mentioned at the beginning, I've got my snoring dogs in the background. You know, I've seen people on calls where their kids come running in, their dogs jump on their laps, their cats jump on their laps. They have to leave because they have to homeschool their children. Again, I think it's really important. And when we get into managers, to really respect and understand the different hurdles. And also try to flex our businesses as we do these types of things. I'll give you a perfect example. My husband works for a big global bank. And when we first went into lockdown, I remember every single day he was so frustrated because he couldn't get into the system. The company system was just not working. It couldn't handle all of these people. And the company was so rigid. They're like, well, you still have to work these core hours. We still want you to work from 9 to 4. And it's like, but that doesn't work because the system will not support people from 9 to 4. Also, some people might have to homeschool their children between 9 to 4. So again, we need to think about those types of things. The next one is that obviously we can't always do the things that we've done before. And I know that as a business, and I know, Neil, you said you're talking about pivoting tomorrow. As businesses, we've had to pivot about what are we doing? But also in how we treat our people, we need to think about how we need to do it differently. And then finally, we need to do it quickly. And I'm going to show you a graph in a few minutes about how quickly things are changing for people. I mean, I don't know about you, but every week seems to be different, whether the government's telling us something different or how people are reacting to it. So if there was ever a time for a bias for action, it's definitely now. So don't know if anybody has any thoughts on any of that. If not, I'll just jump right into employee engagement. Yeah, okay. I've got an eye on the chat room here. So I wanted to start by redefining employee engagement, and 2 things I wanted to talk about. First, about why is it important? So why is employee engagement important? Now, I'm sure if you've seen Glenn do a talk before, he and I always start with numbers because I don't know about you. I want proof of things. And these are some of the common numbers that we have seen in the past. You know, you get higher productivity with employee engagement, you get higher sales, you get higher profitability. I've got probably 4 slides full of these. But I think now the difference is that now engagement and people are even more important. When we are asking so much more of our people, they have to deal with the challenges and the stress and the risks that they're having at home, and then also trying to do it with people. One of the things that I like to do, because I think numbers are great, but one of the things that I like to do is to show you what happens when you don't have engaged employees. Have you ever thought about that? I'm always curious about, just think of somebody that you have on your team who's engaged, and then think about somebody who is disengaged, okay? And normally I share these 3 pictures, which I'm going to share with you. So this is a disengaged employee. I'm sure you might have some of these. This sounds like my teenage son, who does as little work as possible. And that's what a disengaged employee will do for your company. This is a disengaged employee who either doesn't know how to spell school, or they can't be bothered. Usually it's the latter. Have you ever had an employee like that, where they just don't really care? They make a mistake, they don't do anything about it. And this type of employee really worries me, because this kind of employee, you need to know if you make a mistake. We all make mistakes. We want employees who are going to hold up their hands and say, you know what, I made a mistake, and either fix it or get someone to teach them how to spell the word school. This is always my most scary picture of a disengaged employee, which is this guy's job is to push flammable fuel at a racetrack. And do you see in the box? He's got a cigarette in his mouth. And this is one of my concerns about a disengaged employee, because it doesn't just impact themselves. You know, this guy's going to blow himself up. But if you look around, he's at a racetrack. You know, there's a father and son right behind him. You know, there's some other people over to the left. And that is one of the challenges of disengaged employee. But I thought I should probably add another picture based off of our current situation. So this is the new world of a disengaged employee, that they're so disengaged that they turn the camera off on Zoom, and they put their dog in front of their computer to do the work. So yeah, I think whether we are in normal times or we're in the middle of whatever you want to call what we're in now, it's really, really important to have our people on our side. So with that, Neil, do you want to come in with the poll, if you don't mind, please? So we've got a couple of polls just to get your thoughts on what's going on in your company. So the first poll says, how has employee engagement changed at your company during the crisis? Do you think that it's decreased? So employees are less engaged? Do you think it's remained about the same? Has it improved? People are actually more engaged, or you're not sure, which is fine, because some people haven't actually measured it, or they might be so busy just putting out fires, they don't really have a pulse of it. So if you could take a minute to fill in this poll. Okay, wow, engagement has improved. 45% said that it has improved. It's decreased, it's remained the same, and it's 10%. And the reason I wanted to ask this question is that I've been helping a lot of companies over the last couple of months. And some of them have actually, just like 45% of you, have said that you have had higher engagement. And I think that you really need to pat yourself on the back for that, because I know it's a lot of work to be able to engage people during this. For people who it's decreased, I do know that it actually is really hard to do it. And again, it depends on what's going on in your business. So interesting mix of that. Hopefully what we can do today is add things so that if you have high engagement, make sure that it maintains. And then for those of you where it's decreased, give you a couple, ideas. I've got lots of stories to share with you guys about how it can improve. And for people who've remained the same, again, maybe we can give you some things just to make sure that you do that. So fantastic. Great. Okay.
Debra,
yes.
sorry to interrupt, and apologies because I turned up 5 minutes late, so I turned up at the agenda time. My meeting was overrunning. When I answered this question, I also thought about not just about myself. I thought more about at the company level, because
yes.
the question was supposed, how is changing in your company? So I was not just thinking about myself. I was thinking about the company in general. And 30 seconds. For me, it's more because in our company, we normally have home worker and people in the office.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that now we're all online, it was a level playing field. So in a certain sense, made everyone equal. And okay, I won't go into that, but there are people that maybe are worried about themselves, they're worried about their families, or obviously they put themselves in the work, or they want to make sure that the company performs better because that gives them security. So there are different levels why people get more engaged. But even taking a step back at the company level, my view is that people are more engaged.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, I'm starting to think about what are the things that we've learned over the last couple of months that we can continue going forward. And companies like what you described, where you have you've always had people who work from home, and you also have people who work in the office. A lot of companies I've been speaking to are going to continue some of these things so that they can maintain that haves and have-nots, because in the past they used to have a divide. So it is interesting, and I agree, that's where companies have seen engagement improve, when all of a sudden it's able to reach and touch everyone. But yeah, no, thank you for that. So normally when I would define an engaged employee in the book that we wrote, Build It, I would define it 3 ways. And I'd like you really to think about, what are you doing to deliver on this? So for example, an engaged employee is someone who understands and believes in the direction the company is going. And if you think about it, you can only be engaged if you actually know what's going on. All right. The second way is that they understand how their role impacts and contributes. I like to think of it like a puzzle piece, so that I know how I help complete the puzzle at my company. And if I think about a lot of companies that I've worked at in the past, I don't think that we've done a good job of that. People do not know where they fit in. They don't know where they make a difference. And the only way to truly be engaged is to know that. And then again, the third way that I would normally describe an engaged employee is that they genuinely want their company to succeed. And I'm not talking about putting in extra hours. It's more about being smart and driven and innovative to help your company to succeed. And if you think about over the last couple of months and beyond, this is the type of employee that we need at our company. We want people to understand what's going on, to know where they fit in, and to do whatever it takes to help our business pivot, to succeed, to be innovative, and to get through it. But if I really think about, again, during this crisis, what has changed when it comes to engagement, it's that in order to be engaged, you believe that your company cares about you and supports you. And if you think about what's been going on, companies have been doing a brilliant job. And think about what you've been doing for your employees. This is something that is so, so important. And I literally just yesterday, which is why, Neil, my slide numbers have changed. I just read a study yesterday that talks about what happens when employees feel that their company cares. Okay. And it was, I actually went back to the people and asked them, and they said it was a company that they did, a study they did in the UK for about, 300 employees or something. And what they found is that if you believe that your company cares about you, you're 10 times more likely to recommend them, 9 times more likely to stay for more than 3 years, which these days is an eternity, 7 times more likely to feel included, which is really important, 2 times more likely to be engaged, and 4 times less likely to suffer from stress and burnout. So I really believe that this concept of caring is so much more important. And all the things that we're going to talk about today are ways that we can bring this to life. And related to that, the last thing I wanted to talk about engagement is that I believe that the order of what is important to our employees has changed. And again, think about your employees and think about yourself personally. What really is important to you at this point in time? I'm sure you've all seen this Maslow's hierarchy before. Everyone's all of a sudden brought it back out again. I think it was in the 40s that it came out. And what it talks about is what is most important. And it's a pyramid, because you think about at the bottom, you need to make sure that you feel safe. You've got food, water, shelter, warmth, security, stability, working your way up. Then it's a sense of belonging, self-esteem, self-actualization. And if I think about as an HR person and a business leader over the last 10 years or so, I've really been focusing on the ones at the top of the pyramid. But COVID-19 has really brought us all the way down to the bottom, where people are so busy worrying about the physiological and the safety and the belonging. And that's what I mean, that it's changed the order about what is important. I picked this particular one, this image, because someone at the bottom wrote that Wi-Fi, and I would agree with that. These days, if you have good Wi-Fi, you're good. I saw another version where it had toilet paper at the bottom. Personally, I would put flour, because I can't find flour anywhere, and it's my husband's birthday on Monday, and I really need to find some flour to bake a cake for him. So I think it's important to think about, going back to the beginning, about your employees, and think about what is most important to your employees right now. This is the engagement bridge that we write about in our book. And again, all of these 10 things are still important. But if I think about the basics, that's all changed. And again, since I like numbers, I wanted to share with you, this is quite interesting. I'm looking forward to the next version of this coming out. There was a study done, and I apologize, it was in the US, but I still think it would hold true here in the UK and in Ireland. And what they did is they went out to employees and they said, what is top in your mind? What are some of the issues that you're concerned about? And this was the first survey they did. They did this one in April. And if you look in the blue box, it says, what are the most important things? And the first thing was financial security. So think back when we were first going through everything and businesses were closing and people were being asked to work from home. It was financial security, health and well-being. Everyone was concerned about that. Family, definitely. And productivity and work was at the bottom, because at that point in time, we were just trying to get the basics in place, weren't we? We weren't even thinking about, how are we going to get work done? But if you zoom ahead to the next survey they did, which was in May, the 1st of May, you can see how the priorities from an employee's perspective have changed. So work-life balance, all of a sudden, now that everyone's getting used to it, they're trying to figure out how are they going to be able to juggle everything. And if you read reports, unfortunately, what's happening for a lot of people is that they're working too hard. They're putting in too many hours, trying to be Superman, Superwoman, getting everything done. Also high on the list is, again, tech. How are they going to get their job done? How are they going to figure out how to use Zoom? Two-way communications. Productivity and engagement is up there. Emotional and social and physical well-being. And I think it's really interesting, again, how things are evolving. And, if we do this survey in another couple of weeks, I'm sure these types of things will be slightly different. So we thought we would do a quick poll again and get your thoughts when it comes to this. So if you think about, before I jump into some of the different areas and you think about some of the challenges, what are your biggest challenges? Would it be communicating to your workforce? Would it be supporting the well-being of your workforce, making your people feel appreciated, leading your workforce remotely, or again, you don't know, which is fine as well. So if you could just take a minute to making your employees feel appreciated. Interesting. I do have a section on that one. So that's the most one. And actually, I'm very pleased that that's high on your guys' list. Well-being second, which I expected to be second. And then leading your workforce remotely and communicating. And what that shows me, to be honest with you, is that you guys have gotten past the communications. You've figured out how to do it. You've also figured out how to lead your workforces remotely. And now, again, if you think about that pyramid, you're working your way up the pyramid. All right. Fantastic. Okay. So let's get going. Bringing your company values out to play. How many of you have company values? I'm assuming you all have company values. Yeah. So I'm basing it on the premises that you do have values. If for some reason you don't have values, give me a call. Let me know. I'm more than happy to well, actually, I was going to volunteer for each of your companies. If one person on the call sends me an address, I'm happy to send a copy of my values book if anybody wants it. Values are so important, and Neil said that at the beginning. If you think about values, they are what is going to help your business succeed in good times and in bad. So just a couple things I wanted to talk about values. The first one is, I know it seems silly and very basic, but I think it's important to take a step and remind yourself why you have your values. If you think about your values, I've got this picture of the bullseye here. You've created these values because you believe these are what are going to help your company to succeed. These are going to help you achieve your mission, achieve your purpose, get that bullseye. So remind yourself of that and then use them for that. An interesting statistic about values also, and I know that we're not necessarily recruiting, but we will be recruiting again, is that a Glassdoor survey just last year said that 77% of people, so almost 8 out of 10 people, said that they would consider a company's culture and their values before they apply for a job. So values are even more important than they ever were before, not just for helping your business to succeed, but getting your people to join your company. So the first thing that I wanted to suggest to you and to think about, oh, you are recruiting, well done. Yes, we love that. Is to use them as you pivot and as you flex. And I just thought I'd use myself as an example. So you can see behind me how colorful my office is. Yes, you can tell I'm a colorful person. These are my 2 company values. So my 2 company values are to open the door to possibilities and to create magic. So when we went into this whole crisis, I had the whole year planned out. I was going to be in Ireland this week speaking at an event. Next week, I was going to be in the US. I had the whole year planned out. Also had a new book. I was going to do a book tour. Well, like many of you, that all changed. And, you sit and you think about, what in the world am I going to do next? Now, from a business perspective, you look at that and you think, this is what my business is about. This is how I'm going to pivot. But also for me, I pivoted based on my values. And I thought, if this is what I'm all about, opening the door to possibilities and creating magic, how can I do that? And very quickly, what I did is I just opened the door to anyone in HR and offered my help for free. And I said, you know what? I'll be your mentor. I'll be your brainstorm. I'll be your psychologist. Anything that I could do to help my fellow HR people get through the last 2 months. And that's pretty much what I spent 2 months doing, was helping people see what was on the other side of the door and create magic so that they continue to engage their employees. Now, I know that you guys are doing that as well, definitely. And I would encourage you to continue to use your values to help yourself pivot and adapt to this new world. And then the final way to do this is to bring them out to play. Now, I titled my book, Bring Your Values Out to Play. So you can tell I like this phrase. And what I mean by that is use them over and over again in everything that you do. And I just wanted to share a couple examples with you. This is a company in the UK called Misguided. Their values are on the right-hand side. So their values are, it doesn't have the hashtags, but they have 4 values: hashtag love lots, hashtag dream big, hashtag believe always, and hashtag win together. You can tell they're a fashion company, young millennials, and everything that they've been doing throughout the last couple of months is living through these values. It's all about having fun. It's all about loving each other, supporting each other, believing together. And 2 of the things that they did, they have something called Happy Monday, where every Monday on their online communications portal, they share stories. They share stories of what people have done, how people are supporting each other, wins that they've had together, what they're dreaming of, really, really living through the values. I'm not sure about the picture of the dog there, but there you go. The other thing that they've done, and a couple people had mentioned in the poll about recognition, which I'll talk about later, they've created these really, really fun work from home e-cards. So you can see just 2 of them on the screen, where anybody can send anyone an e-card that says sending you virtual hugs, or hey homie, a little bit of play on word there, really to encourage people. So you can see that what they've done is they've started with their values, and they've thought about how can we live our values in this new world. Another way that companies are doing this, and you know what, there are so many companies doing it, it was really hard to just pick 3. Companies are living through their values to the outside world also. So they're not just showing their employees that they believe in their values, but they're showing the world that they believe in their values. And I just picked 3 examples here. One of them is BrewDog. And BrewDog and other distilleries have done this. They've used their distilleries, instead of making beer, to make hand sanitizer, which is fantastic to help everybody out. Cliff Bar, it's a company in the US, and I read about them the other day, and what they've been doing is they've been donating thousands and actually millions of their bars to all of the people out there working, all of the nurses, all of the doctors, everybody who's out on the front line. And then Burberry, the bottom example, again, another company, other companies are doing this as well. And what they're doing is, instead of manufacturing their lovely trench coats, they're out there manufacturing the scrubs for the doctors and the nurses, and the face masks. And they're even using their distribution centers to help get things out there to people who need it. My husband just told me yesterday on our dog walk about how he was reading about a company who is they're giving their leftover, it's a restaurant, and since they can't serve people, they're serving homeless people. So lots of different ways that companies can do this. And my point is that people are going to remember our businesses when this is over. Our employees are going to remember, how did we make them feel? What did we do for them throughout this? And the world is going to remember it as well. I don't know about you, but I just remember there was this whole huge story on the news about how companies like, I hate to pick on them, but Victoria Beckham, she was beat up because they were saying how dare she take the furlough pay? You know, she's a multimillionaire. She shouldn't be taking the furlough pay. And, you know, it's happened to other companies as well. People are going to remember what's happening during these times. So why don't we move to another poll? This poll is about your values. So just curious. And then I wouldn't mind in the chat if people maybe share how you've done it. So have you brought your values out to play during the crisis? Always, meaning when you do something, you always use that filter, that lens of your values. You've done it sometimes, you haven't done it, or you don't know if you've done it. Actually really good. Sometimes 60%, always 35%. Wow, that's fantastic. Does anybody want to give an example of what you've done? Either take yourself off mute or put it on the chat room. I'd love to hear what you're doing.
I can give an example.
Okay.
Two, actually. One is that nearly every day, not quite every day, one of the directors sends an email out to everybody in the company. And very frequently that is centered on one or other of our values. Particularly the MD is good at doing that. And the other example I can say from the meetings that I have every day with the other directors of the business, we quite often get into a place where we're not quite sure how to move forward, and centering ourselves back onto the values has a really positive effect on how we make a decision.
Perfect. And it's interesting because in my book, I wrote a couple questions to think about as you're developing your values. And one of the things that I said is that if you don't feel that you can live your values and center and make decisions based off of your values, don't have them. It's an absolute waste of time. So it's lovely that you're actually doing that and using them again as that magnet, helping you go in the right direction. Fantastic. Let's see. People have said daily correspondence from senior management always relates to your values. Fantastic. Published a weekly newsletter by email, CEO blog, flywheel, competitions, guidelines. Fantastic. We're going to talk more about all the great things that people are doing in communications. It sounds like you've got some really good examples for everyone. It's interesting. Right before we went into lockdown, I helped a company launch their values, and we did it at Kidzania. Has anyone ever been to Kidzania? It was so much fun. Have you ever launched a values while you're playing the drums or while you're flying an airplane? It was a blast. And somebody else asked me to launch their values just recently, and we're doing it through Zoom. And you have to get a bit more creative, but still we're going to do things like some type of virtual scavenger hunt and put people into little chat rooms and stuff. So although we might be together, you can still use your values. Perfect. Okay, great. So communications, and you're all starting to talk about communications already. So what I wanted to talk about now is communicating through the crisis. And a couple reasons why it's important. And if you think about communications, you know, why is it something that is even more important now than it was before? A couple things that I wrote down on my notes I didn't want to forget. First of all, it reduces fear. I mean, I don't know about you, but I try to only read the news once a day. And sometimes I get more confused than I was already. And often it makes us very fearful. So if there's anything that we can do to help our employees by taking a little of that fear away, communications can do that. It can also help cut through the noise of uncertainty. Communications is also great for connections, and connections are just so important with people being separated. Even when you're, you guys are, we've got two sets of people who are sitting in the same room, which is wonderful. That's a connection that many of us don't have, but you also have other employees out there who need that type of connection. Also, communications builds trust. So if you think about, excuse me, every time you're communicating to people, good and bad news, you're building that trust with people. Going back to that whole idea of connection and such, I've sort of been describing communications like, the story of the little boy who fell in a well, and he's at the bottom of the well and he's crying, and all of a sudden someone comes and finds him, and all the person did was talk to them. They haven't even rescued them yet. They've talked to them, and all of a sudden that the little kid starts to relax. And the way I like to think of it is that communications is that lifeline. It's that lifeline that is going to make us feel like we're not by ourselves. We have our company, we have our colleagues all in it together, helping each other. So, sorry, I wanted to share a statistic. And again, this is the US statistic by Gallup. And what they did is they asked people about whether or not their companies have been communicating to them well throughout COVID-19. And the good news is that 52% of people said that they felt strongly that their companies communicated to them as far as what their plan of action is, how they're going to respond. So that's great. More than 50%. I guess the bad news is that 48% of people are still in that well, still in that uncertainty and that fear. So it'd be interesting if you think about how many of your employees actually feel like they've been communicated to well, and how can we continue to help them. I wanted to give you a couple of tips, some things to think about as you're doing it, and I've got 5 of those. So first one is to communicate in a more open and honest way. And if you read Build It, or if you heard my co-author Glenn speak, excuse me, this is one of the things that we talk about all the time. It's so important to communicate openly and honestly and transparently. And again, even more now, even when we don't have good news, we still need to be able to communicate to our employees. And the way I like to think about it is, you hire these people because you think they're a fully formed adult who can do their job, and you need to treat them like that. A lot of times we don't share information with employees, and I say we because I've done it before as an HR and business leader, because we want to protect our employees, or we don't want to worry them. But if we don't bring them into the conversation, they cannot be a part of the solution. And the other reason is that if we don't tell them what's going on, they're going to make up their own truth. Have you had that before with the rumor mill? My husband, this was, probably about 6 months ago, before all of this, he came home one day and he said that they've just announced that someone senior in the company is leaving. And he said they spent the entire week just all huddled around each other, trying to figure out why the person was leaving. It's like, why didn't they just tell everybody why the person was leaving, instead of wasting so much time and people thinking the worst of the situation? So I challenge you, every time you go out to speak to your employees, I like to think of it as a transparency table, and think about how you can communicate as much as possible transparently, getting all that information out to people. Second, communicate in a more human way. And what I mean by that is that I know a lot of times in businesses we're very formal. We have things that are like 3 pages long. Normally people don't have an attention span. Right now, they don't have much of an attention span at all. So think about how you can do things in a human way, a way that's really going to connect with your employees. The way I like to think about it is if your child gets hurt or something like that, what happens to your voice? Your voice changes, the tone of voice changes, the words change. You completely communicate in a different way. So think about how you need to adapt your style to do that. And just some of the examples that you guys have said, I think work already. Having your CEO come in and do a blog, to speak to people makes such a difference. It's more human, making sure you're getting the right person in. One company I spoke to, they had the CEO do a little video of the day in the life of the CEO, and everyone absolutely loved it because it showed the human side of their CEO. As a matter of fact, they liked it so much that the rest of the leadership team was asked to do a day in the life. So think about how you can do that from a human perspective. Next one is to leverage your communication tools. So think about what's worked in the past and think about what's going to work now. I'm a big fan of communicating things in lots of different ways through, I mentioned the video, doing videos, doing Zoom, doing blogs, doing email, doing texts. Think about what can you do to get that information out to your people. Personally, I like to ask my employees how they like to receive information as well, which tools are going to work best for them. The fourth one is to adapt your feedback approach. So I know probably many of you do, I don't know, engagement survey, maybe once a year, maybe every 6 months. If we're gonna know how to support our employees now and in the future, we need to be a bit quicker when it comes to that. We need to be a bit more agile with how we're getting feedback. So just out of curiosity, in the chat, have people been doing surveys right now? Have you been going out and getting feedback from your employees? Yes, no? Yep, fantastic. We've got a yes there. Yeah. I know that depending on which technology you use, most of the people who do surveys right now have created a special COVID-19 survey. Yep, via NPS score, definitely. And I think it's really important to do a different survey because the questions are not the same. I was speaking to the NEC. So they're a convention center in Birmingham. And you can imagine most of their employees are furloughed. And what we wanted to do is we just wanted to get a feel for how they were doing on furlough. We also wanted to get a feel for how much support they wanted from the company, because I was coming up with all these crazy ideas for them about, they do concerts and things like that. Let's just start bringing the furloughed people back and doing like a Zoom concert every week. But we thought maybe we should go to them and figure out where their head is right now and try to understand what type of support. So we put together a special, it was only 3 questions for their furloughed people. And then I think we ended up doing about 5 questions for their people who are working from home. So think about what are the questions that you need to ask them and adapt those questions. The 2 things when it comes to feedback, whenever you do feedback, these are my 2 really strong recommendations is, first of all, only ask questions that you're willing to do something about. So, I hate when people ask me a survey question. I know darn well they're not going to change anything. So make sure it's something that you can do. So if you truly are committed to, I don't know, changing your well-being program, then ask about it. If right now you don't have the time, you don't have the money, don't ask. The second thing that's really important is that when you ask their feedback, share the results and then do something about it. When I used to work for Merlin Entertainments, and they're the ones who have Legoland and Alton Towers and all those places, we used to do a survey called the Wizard. The Wizard wants to know. And then as soon as we finished the survey, we would come back and we'd say, the Wizard is doing this, the Wizard is doing that, so that people knew the connection and that we were really listening to them. Okay. And then the last one is to communicate over and over and over again. And I don't mean just throwing things randomly. You need to have some logic and some strategy behind it. But, to me, short messages, more than one time, making sure that people get that information. And it's important because some days you might not read something, other days you will. Also, I should have written this down before. Has anyone ever heard of the forgetting curve? I've forgotten the statistics already, which is a bit ironic. But it's something like that an hour after you get off of this call, you're going to forget 70% of what I said. By the end of the day, you're going to forget something like 80%. By the end of the week, you're going to forget 90% of what I said. Okay. So I don't remember the numbers. I remember the concept all the time. And for that reason, every time I communicate to people, I think about what is that 10% that I really, really need people to remember. And that's the part that I'm going to communicate over and over again. Also, and you might notice this with my slides, if there's something that I really want people to remember, sometimes I do it in a silly way. So like my slides of disengagement, I consciously made them goofy because you're going to remember the picture of the dog in front of the computer. You'll remember that more than if I shared with you a statistic or some words that say a disengaged employee is not good. You will remember those pictures. So again, think about what are your key messages and how you can communicate them in a way that they're going to stick with your employees. I just wanted to give you one example of what one company did for their communications plan, because as I said, it's important to communicate over and over again, but the more you can be strategic about it, the better. So what they did, and I've seen about 3 or 4 different ways that companies have been doing this, they break their communications out into a different focus, a different topic each day of the week, okay? So this particular company, Monday is Leaders Motivation, and that's the day that their CEO goes out. So everybody knows Monday is the day they're going to hear from their CEO or someone else on the leadership team. Tuesday is called Thirsty for Target, which is the day that the CFO is going to give that business update. This is how we are as a business. Wednesday is Wellbeing Wednesday, and that's the day they're going to do something fun around well-being, or they're going to share information to help people from a well-being perspective. The company is a tech company. I should have told you that. Thursday is Techie Day, where they're going to share the nuts and bolts of what's going on from a technical design perspective. And then I love Friday. Friday is Full Fat Fun. So again, it's a really fun way to do it. This isn't just the only way. As I said, there's other ways, but maybe just a takeaway from this is to think about, again, what are your key messages that you want to share with your employees? And is there a way to break it out and a way to do it differently? Okay, I'm going to breathe for a second because have you sorted it out, Neil? The chat, the breakout rooms?
Oh, I think so. I have. Yes.
Fantastic. So what we thought we would do is I've just shared with you 5 tips on communications, and we thought it might make sense to maybe, before you go back and just start doing things, maybe take a few minutes to think about what are you doing already, what are some questions you have, and break into smaller groups, and then we can bring it back. If anybody wants to share some of these things, we can do that. Let's move on to well-being. And yeah, I mean, well-being is an area that's, you know, as an HR person, I've seen each year on year, we realize as businesses that it's important to do it, and even more so now. If you remember back the question that Gallup asked about communications, they also asked the questions about well-being. And for this one, instead of 52%, 49% of employees said that they feel that their company cares about their overall well-being. So again, getting close to 50, so that's good, but still there's more that companies can do. This is an interesting and a bit scary statistic, which is that 56% of people in a survey by LinkedIn said that their mental health has deteriorated since lockdown began. And I'm sure that you've seen this in your organizations or even people that you know personally. I think that it's, you know, from a mental perspective, it's really put a big strain on people. So what I wanted to do is to maybe share with you 4 things to think about as you're supporting your employees when it comes to well-being. The first one is to consider all areas of well-being, and there's lots of different ways to make the recipe, to cut the pie, cut the pizza, whatever you want to call it. I like to think of well-being as 4 slices. So the first one is, in no particular order, would be physical well-being. That's usually where well-being starts in organizations. The second one would be the mental. Third one would be financial. That's something that's probably only come into well-being the last 5 years. And then the fourth, and not everybody considers this as well-being, but the fourth is really the social aspect of well-being. So, and that goes back to that idea of connection. So what are we doing to help people connect? So what I would encourage you to do is to, first of all, feedback. What kind of support do your employees need from Wellbeing? And then think about for those 4 things, almost like a spreadsheet. What I try to do is map out all 4 areas and think about, what am I doing to support the physical? What am I doing to support these? And you might decide you're not going to support all 4, but at least make a conscious effort to decide what is going to work best for your employees. The next one is to make it more accessible. And what I mean by that is that there's probably some great things that you're doing already when it comes to well-being. Bring it out and make it easy for employees. A friend of mine the other day was saying how, my company does nothing for well-being. And then I said, well, talk me through your company's, intranet. What does it look like? And lo and behold, if she really clicked a few times, she could find it. But it was a bit of work. And I only knew it because I'm an HR person. I know how silly sometimes it is that we design things. So what can you do to make it more accessible? Also, you might have people working from home. You might have people in different situations. Think about how you need to adapt it to make it more accessible now. Like you used to might have, yoga classes. Now you're doing online yoga classes. So what are the things that you can do to make it accessible for people to actually use these things and know that they're out there? Next one, this has to do with the 4th part or the 4th pillar of well-being, which is to increase social touch points. So think about how you can help with those connections. Someone I know that I interviewed for my last 2 books, this guy is this big, strong, I think he used to be a rugby player. He's literally 6'6". I mean, he's a big, big guy. And he posted on LinkedIn the other day how, during lockdown, he's living by himself. And the thing that helps him from a mental perspective are all of those social touch points that they have in the organization, all the fun things. And I'm going to share a bunch of different things that companies are doing. But even for someone as big and tough and strong as him, it's really, really important to have these. These are the things that he says helps him, maintain his sanity. And with that, what I mean is to get creative. This is a time where you can just try the craziest things. Our employees just will appreciate anything that we do. And, I encourage companies to try different things. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, that's absolutely fine. Example of that, I was interviewing a company in the Netherlands, and they came up with this clever idea of sending everybody a jump rope. He told me what the word was in Dutch, but I can't remember it. And he sent every employee a jump rope, and he said, happy spring, here's a jump rope. We're all going to get together once a week, and we're going to have jumping classes. Well, it didn't work very well. Everybody realized they were too embarrassed to actually do jumping in front of everybody. So that's fine. Get creative. It doesn't work, change it. So to inspire you, I thought I would share a couple examples of what companies are doing. Online exercise classes. Now, you might just be ticking all of them, which is great. Hopefully you can get a couple new ideas. Online, possibly meditation classes, boot camps. Some of these things cost some things. Some of them cost nothing. Nutrition classes. A lot of us, are trying to figure out what's the best way to be healthy. Cooking classes. One company I interviewed, they said, they have a canteen, a restaurant in their offices, and they have their chef who's just, they can't be cooking for them. So they're going to be giving cooking classes for people. And they even brought their kids in and let their kids do it. One company I interviewed, they did that whole idea. I don't know what cooking show it is where you get some really strange ingredients. So since you can't buy everything these days, they picked the things that they knew everybody had in their cupboard. And then they had a cooking class, and they even had a cooking competition. One company I was helping, they invited me to this, but I couldn't join them. They had a cocktail making class. I thought that was quite fun. A couple more ideas. Who has the best desk competition? And they had everybody send pictures in, and they all voted on who actually had the best desk. The company that explained this said that the person who won, he had an ironing board as his desk. That was the only thing he could find for his desk. Spotify recently did a talent competition. That's very Spotify to do that. Pub quizzes. those are always fun. One company I interviewed, what they did is they let every employee 2 times a week do a takeaway, and then they paid 50% for this. The only rule was they needed to do local restaurants because they wanted to support the local community. Desert Island Discs, everyone loves music. And then this last example, someone just told me the other day, which is Pinot and Picasso session, where they actually had art classes where they had somebody come, and you could bring the kids again, and he shared all the lovely pictures that that people did. 2 more things I wanted to share. I wanted to share this one for you, just to show that sometimes we don't realize the difference that we make, but we really make a big difference. So in this particular company, what they did is we were brainstorming, and we decided, why don't we give people choice on what they need? So you'll get copies of the slide if you want to read the whole thing. But basically what we said is, you know what, we're going to give you a choice. You can get different things if you want to make your home office better, or your office is fine. We're going to give you a membership to Amazon Prime, Amazon Music, different types of subscriptions. And what I love about this, on the left-hand side, you might be able to read this. This is from an employee that he shared the feedback. And the employee said, wow, I had to read this twice as I could not believe what I was reading. So thankful to work for a company that genuinely cares about their employees' well-being. Thank you so much, gobsmacked. So a simple thing like giving their employees a little bit of money to, you know, bring music to their life or whatever, made such a huge difference. And then the last example I wanted to share, I thought this was quite creative. This is Atlassian did this. I don't know if you know Atlassian, and they a global company, and they decided to support their local communities, all these small businesses who just aren't getting any work. So they did a charity auction, and they had all these different things that employees could buy. And it was all, again, it's like, you know, when this is all over, you'll be able to get this type of product. And it was a great way to have something fun for their employees and also something fun for the community. So I hope I've given you different ideas, but I know that I don't have all the ideas. So what we thought we'd do now is we go into a break room again and give you guys an opportunity to share what you're doing. And then if you want to come back and share others, we can do that. So back to you, Neil.
Perfect, yeah. And yeah, just before we move, it's great to see that you referenced Atlassian. They're a company that embrace all the scaling up tools. And Scott is someone that Vern references many, many times. So good to see that these guys.
Karen came up with a great wellness thing, which we launched on the 1st of May. So
okay,
we've about 6 teams of 4 people, or maybe 7, I'm not sure. And we're walking to our office in China. So everyone has to calculate their daily steps and stuff. So it's great, a good buzz around the office. Some people are even getting up to 30,000 steps. So a lot of competition and great interaction between all the teams. So it's really caused a good buzz and wellness thing here.
Yeah, I love a good old step challenge. It was funny. I was at a company before, and I'm quite short, and everybody fought over whose team I'd be on, because I take little steps. And I walk quite a bit. So like the CEO's like, no, she has to be on my team. So they like figured out who would have the best steps, and then, you know, put teams together. I think it's a great idea. And I like that you've got a strategy on this is where you're getting to. Brilliant.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. And you can see them towards the end of the week starting to take a few more steps if they feel they haven't done great the day before. Like, they're very competitive.
Yeah.
You earn your cocktail at the weekend. I hear, Mark, you've become the new Steve Jobs. You're kind of doing walks with your team and having the one-to-one around the factory.
Yeah, it's a great way to get steps in, and it's a great way to communicate and talk with people, just walking around the building and getting a bit of fresh air. So as soon as we're off this, I think that's what me and Karen will go doing.
A couple of laps.
Yeah, good stuff. All righty. I think we're all back now, Deborah. Do you want to see if anyone wants to open up a bit more other than just the team in Ireland? Anyone else got any? Yeah, let's just go around that. Let's go to Chris Orr and the team. I know you've been doing a fair bit, Chris. In terms of Aegis, what are the sort of things you've been reflecting on?
Oh, well, in that breakout just there, we were sort of reflecting on how to focus the communication on people who don't actively engage. So we do a lot of communication to the whole team. And there are people who are more active and people who are less active in actually responding to that. So we were talking about the need to connect with the people who are not making contact, find out what's going on in their worlds.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about managers
by the way,
later.
We do have a daily huddle.
Mm-hmm.
Every single member of the company is involved in a huddle with their team every day. So there really shouldn't be anyone who's not being communicated with or having some engagement with on a daily basis. But as one of the directors, I don't know whether there are people within those teams who are not kind of really responding to it.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say that, we're going to be talking about managers and the role that managers have to play, because you are right. I mean, we talked about at the beginning with everyone being so different. So everyone's going to want to participate in different ways, communicate in different ways. Even like that walking challenge, there might be some people who just aren't bothered with those types of things. And you want to try to create a lot of different ways to be able to connect people and engage people and make sure that there's something for everyone. Definitely.
Very good. What about the team from PP Control and Automations? I know just you put a little chat on there. What are you guys up to?
Hi, Neil.
Hello, Tony.
We were just discussing, obviously you're aware we would normally do our end of season, end of quarter celebrations as part of the OPSP, but we can't do that. So we're just discussing how we could actually organise a quiz online for 200 plus people, send out Just Eat vouchers to everybody well beforehand so they get pizza in, Chinese in, and just do one great big huge quiz with some great prizes, and just create an online end of season celebration.
Beautiful.
I love it. You're bringing the party to their houses.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like, think about what you would have if you were all together. Could you send everybody like a little box with like things in it, or a virtual box, or it's really making us get creative. I was going to say think outside of the box, but I've said box too many times. But no, I love that idea.
Excellent. We'll keep going, Deborah, and then I'll bring in the other guys after the next breakout session that we haven't involved so far.
Fantastic. Good. And I know that we're only doing 7 minutes on these. And the main reason is because, first of all, we only have 2 hours. But it's just to get you talking about it. But hopefully what this will encourage you to do is to come together and talk about it again. Also, I love bringing my employees into it. They come up with much better ideas than I do. And also going out to employees and asking them, what are the things they want to do? Google does something called Googler to Googler, where they have different employees who lead different things. So go out there and ask employees, what are their passions? What are the things that they could share with other people? It's another way to bring people into it. Okay, 2 more sections. One is recognition, which is something that a lot of people were talking about, recognition. Recognition is actually probably going to be my next book. I'm absolutely passionate about recognition, but recognition in a different way. And it's interesting if you just really reflect for a minute and you think about how people are recognizing each other now compared to how they were before this whole crisis. So we'll go through a couple different tips. But before we do that, we just wanted to do a quick poll on recognition. Yes and no. Yeah, that's what I would expect, because a lot of times in companies, you've got pockets of people who get it and pockets of people who don't. Absolutely do 17%. Fantastic. So it sounds like you're all there, which is good. So hopefully what I can do is share a couple things to help you as you move forward with recognition. Again, I could spend 2 hours on this. I'm going to do it really quickly, but like the other areas, if you want to talk about it more, just reach out to me. More than happy to help. The first one is to take the limits off of recognition. One of my frustrations with recognition is when people think that they have like a certain limit on how many, like I can only recognize someone once a month or once a week or something like that. I had a conversation with my husband. He told me how he recognized somebody and they made them employee of the week. I thought that was great. And then he said, well, they've just done something else great, but I just made them employee of the week. What should I do? I'm like, well, send them a thank you note, recognize them. So it's really important to encourage everyone in your organization, managers, regular level employees, everybody, to know that there is no limit. As long as it's genuine, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, just get out there and do it, okay? The The next one, and this is more specific to where we are right now, is to make it topical. And we've already spent lots of time talking about how, you know, the world is different. We might be working in different ways. We might be dealing with different types of challenges. Take the opportunity to think about, do we need to recognize people for doing different things or doing it in different ways? And I thought I'd just share a couple of examples from companies that have been sharing things with me. The one on the right, I shared with you already, that's Misguided. Those are their 4 cards. So you saw 2 of them before I teased you. So they have sending you virtual hugs, hey homie, high five from home, you make working home from make it sweeter. The bottom one there is my old company, Reward Gateway, and they created 2 special cards. You make working from home a better place to work, and distance makes the heart grow fonder. So again, what can you do to make it topical? The one in the corner is Dunelm, and they decided to create ones that were just a bit different, just to mix things up a bit, and it's related to their products. I think they're really fun. So Dunelm makes home goods. So they do lots of things for, you know, in the kitchen and such. So you've been fantastic. You're doing a great job. We're bowled over by you, and I like the way you roll. So again, like the other one, have a bit of fun. Think about there's different types of things that you need to recognize and do that. The next one is to weave it into other areas. And what I mean by that is, think about if there's other ways that areas can connect. And this is an example. There was a company that I was helping in the US, and they do in the US, in the UK, and they have care homes. So all their employees are just out there, you know, trying to do as much as they can. They're really, really busy. So what the business decided to do is to give them hampers. So every month, I think, they deliver a new set of hampers to the care homes where they work. And when I was talking to them about recognition, what I suggested is, why don't you try to weave recognition into these hampers? Because they were saying how they have, you know, every week they have these amazing stories of superstars who've just really gone above and beyond. And I said, well, why don't you let these superstars pick the next hamper? Why don't, as a way to thank them, you don't have to give people money, just the fact that they get to pick the hamper for everyone else. And it's working really well. It's a great way to be able to say, you know, this hamper was delivered by so-and-so. So think about how you can weave it all together, you know, and make someone feel appreciated. One of the things about recognition, especially now when everybody knows that companies are really watching every penny, every pound, is it doesn't have to involve money at all. The last thing I wanted to do is about making it meaningful. And this is at any time of year. And this is something that I would love for you all to take away. When I rolled out my recognition program at my last company, one of the things that I was disappointed is I put in an amazing program, but what I found is that people didn't really know how to do meaningful recognition. And what I meant by that is I'd read messages that people would send to each other, and it wasn't really their fault, but they just didn't know how to share a message, which meant that when the employee opened the recognition box, the recognition message, it wasn't really doing what it needed to do. So this is a really, really simple, very, very simple tool that I would encourage you to use at your company. And, you know, I've done training classes with my employees before. You know, it takes like a 15-minute training class. And it's just a 3-step process for meaningful recognition. And when you hear it, you're going to think, of course, this is how you do it. The first one is to tell the behavior. So what did the person do? The second is to connect it to the values. You all have values. You all talked about living your values. And the next is to share the impact. And let me just give you an example of this. So say that somebody helped me prepare these slides, okay? So pretend Susie helped me with these slides. Telling the behavior, I would say, thank you, Susie, so much for helping me prepare the slides. I'd connect it to the value. My value is creating magic. You created magic by creating slides that were absolutely beautiful and magical. Share the impact. And this is the one people forget most of the time, which is actually really, really important, which is what difference did it make? So it's all well and good to say thank you for doing the slides, but that's great. But what did I do that was so important? So the impact in this one might be, you know, your slides were you know, so magical that people are going to be able to remember them. They're going to want to actually use them at their companies. So again, what you could do is take this back to your company and help your employees feel more comfortable with recognition. It'll help them a lot. So again, if you think about recognition, whatever you can do to take the training wheels off, take the limits off, get it out there, find out ways if you need to make it more topical, ways to weave it into everything else, and then finally make it more meaningful. That was my 10 minutes on recognition. So again, if we want to open it up to everybody, this is our very last discussion. So if everybody wants to spend 7 minutes and just talk about what you're doing now, share some ideas, and we can bring it back.
Just before we do, I think one of the key takeaways from when Glenn did this with the class last year was we spent 5 minutes, or everyone wrote out a letter.
Perfect.
And had to think about someone right now that they want to thank. So maybe one of the actions to take away from today's session is just to make an accountability for everyone, to just think about someone right now that you'd love to write a letter to or a note to, and commit to doing that. And
yeah, and actually, if we were all together, what I would do is I would have little postcards and I would have you practice the 3 steps. So I think that would be lovely if you do it. And again, practice using those 3 steps that I just shared with you. And when you do your training, do you know what? Give everybody the same task. And it's lovely watching people write the little notes to each other.
So one of the things we started doing when we went into COVID, we have a Friday all hands meeting, and I do a kind of kudos board. So anyone from the company can just chuck in like thanks or well done or good vibes to people, and then I stick some stupid music on in the background and read through the board. And it's really corny, but actually it's like become a very kind of visible, it's quite funny as well, it's become a very visible kind of like recognition idea. The other thing that we're looking at, which we were looking at just before COVID, and then we've put on hold a little bit, but we are going to pick up again, is peer-to-peer rewards. So we were looking at this app called Bonusly, where basically everyone gets 100 points a month, and then there's money attached to that, and you just give it to people based on good work, and you can attach, like, you can say that everyone has to attach a company value when they give points. So we put it on hold just for a little bit, but going to pick it up again soon.
Very good. Yeah, very good. What about team up in Lancaster? Peter and the team, anything you came up with at all?
After our meeting in January this year, we had some really good ideas, and unfortunately we've let them slip. We started off well giving accommodations, and we've let them slip now. COVID's come, but it's probably when we need them more than ever. So we just said we're going to hook up at 11:30 today after this meeting and crack a www. See what we can do.
Very good.
Yeah, and do you know what? If you want to give me a ring, I'm more than happy to help you guys brainstorm and come up with some things. Because you're right. If it doesn't have to cost any money. I actually helped a company, launch something in the middle of COVID-19, and it costs nothing. So yeah, definitely.
Very good.
Glad that helped you guys.
Sean and the team. Again, going back to Walsall.
So we've got a project on goal, as you know, Neil.
Yes.
Once a week, we give a prize away for a superstar, so it's like a £40 Amazon voucher, and that superstar could be driven by a cost-saving improvement that's been made that week, or just someone that's appreciated them for some extra effort that's gone in. Then off the back of that, if all weekly targets are hit, we've got a £100 raffle, so one employee can win £100. And each month we have the biggest saving of the month, and one employee can win £250, or not can win, they do win £250.
Beautiful.
Awards going out there. Weekly, monthly.
Yeah, and do you know what? I think those are great. One challenge to you, again, think about if, so you're doing the weekly, you're doing the monthly, brilliant. Think about all the other people, though, who aren't getting weekly and not getting the monthly, and what are you doing to make them feel appreciated also? So you probably do it already, but if you don't, think about the 95% of people who aren't winning monthlies and weeklies, because they're the people that just simple thanks. Again, they don't need to win anything. A simple thanks can make a huge, huge difference. I've got in my drawer, I've got 3 handwritten cards from Glenn Elliott, my co-author. And anytime I'm in a bad mood, I pull out one of those cards, and it makes me feel great because I knew that he appreciated me. So
what we've got within the company, we've actually got a tool called the Appreciation Station, where any employee can log in. It's a simple form. fill in the form just to say what department they're working, who they'd like to thank and what they'd like to thank them for. And then that gets fed out onto a Teams stream, gets put onto a cool or uncool wall in a canteen, and every employee can see that. So that's been really effective over the last 18 months.
Fantastic. The last thing I wanted to do is to talk about the changing roles of managers, and then just a couple last minute tips. Okay, so a couple things to think about from managers. I think I've got 3 tips for this one. The first thing, and again, it might seem obvious, is to make sure that they're clear on their expectations, especially now. I think that managers have such a difficult job because we do expect a lot of them, and their job has almost doubled now. I was interviewing Dunelm, who most of their employees on furlough because all of their stores are closed, and they've kept on all their managers with the only thing that those managers are being asked to do is to stay connected to their employees, just showing how the role has changed and their expectations have changed. This is something you might have seen in the book that Glenn and I wrote, Build It, which talks about the 10 great things, or 10 things that great leaders do. And a lot of this has built into what I believe are the new expectations of managers during COVID-19, but also I think a lot of it is going to continue on. And I just wanted to spend a few minutes and maybe think about how you can share this with your managers to let them know what these expectations are. So there's just 6 of them that I've put on this slide. The first one is about leading with compassion, and more we expect our managers to be compassionate when they're with our employees, and especially now our employees need it. One of my most favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou. Don't know if you've heard this before. And what she said is that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And as a manager, I always try to remember that. And how am I going to compassionately make sure that people end up feeling in the right way and feel that I care about them? Related to this is to lead with empathy. And especially now, people have said things about, people who are quiet, people shy. If all a manager says to the employee is, "How are you doing?" and they say, "Fine," that's not enough. It needs to go to that next step. What does fine mean? You need to be able to pull that out of people, because some people are not going to want to be able to share until they feel that their employees or their manager is listening to them and being empathetic, listening to the needs. Related to that is the concept of being human. And Glenn and I talk a lot about that on that previous slide that you would have seen, showing that it's okay as a manager not to be perfect. If you make a mistake or something like that, it's okay to admit it, just to show the human side. And I think actually one of the lovely things about this whole working from home is we are showing our human side. We're showing where we live. We're showing all of our flaws. And I think the human side has come out a little bit more. Related to the human is the being authentic, which is that bit about taking your mask off and showing who you really are. Our employees will appreciate it, and actually our employees need it. Another expectation of a manager is to stay connected. When I talked about communications being the lifeline, that manager really is that true lifeline. They are really helping with that connection. So as things go out to our employees, connecting with our employees individually or as teams, do you understand that? What does that mean to you? And having that conversation to be that next level and that next layer of communications. And then finally, the bit about saying thank you. Recognition has to be led through managers. They really need to role model it. So I think it's really important. And these might not be the 6 that you think are right. These are just 6 that I picked. But whatever you believe the expectations are of your managers now, again, which might be different than in the past, the first thing is to let them know it, because we can't just assume that these managers are going to miraculously know what their new expectations are. And related to that is to give them the tools and support. Because again, you're not going to just wake up one morning and all of a sudden be compassionate, be empathetic. I've been loving listening to this series by Brene Brown. I don't know if anybody's read any of Brene Brown's books. They're absolutely brilliant. And she's been doing some podcasts over the last couple of months. And she really is helpful about getting at what it's like to be compassionate. So whether it's reading books, training, just talking to people, helping managers be better, so that, because I know that they want to be the best support they can to their employees, and sometimes they just don't know how to be. I know that when I started out as a manager, I was really good technically, but it took me a while to actually learn the compassionate side of things. But I always laugh when I do sessions with managers, and I say, if I can do it, anyone could do it. Because when I first moved to the UK, it was my first time being a manager, and I was managing the US way, which is like in your face. And my team, after a couple months, said that they had a Debra Corey support group where they would all talk about how in my, how abrupt I was, or how, American I was leading. And so it took me a little while to learn how to be a bit more compassionate and a bit more British in how I manage people. Anyway, the last piece is to help managers reevaluate and deconstruct work and priorities. And what I mean by that is that, we're all facing different challenges. I've been talking about that a lot. You know it already. But what have managers done to actually translate that into jobs? And I'll give you an example of it. I had a friend of mine who came to me almost in tears saying, my manager expects me to do things the same way I did it before and get the same results. I've got 3 kids. I'm trying to homeschool my 3 kids. I'm trying to do my job, and they want me to do everything in the same way. I think it's really important for businesses and managers to take a step back and first of all, just say, is everything important? I mean, this should happen all the time, which it doesn't, but especially now. If I've got 5 things on my plate, is everything just as important to do? Or is it more important to really focus on these 4 things given the challenges? So really make sure that managers understand how they can reevaluate what's going to work for the business and what's going to work for their team and what's going to work for their employees, because we're not living in the same world that we did before, and it's going to continue to evolve, and we need to continue to make sure that we look at these. Somebody just asked for the links to the podcasts. We'll be sending out this presentation. Is that right, Neil?
Yes, we will.
Yep.
Yep.
And what I'll do is I'll send you the links so that you can listen to those as well. Okay. So I know we're almost out of time. So what I wanted to do is just to share a couple more tips just to think about. And a lot of these are things that I talk about all the time anyway. The first one is to rip up the rule books. I'm a rebel. I've got my red cape right behind me. I didn't put it on today. But if there is ever a time to rip up the rule books, it's now. So, and it sounds like you guys are doing it. You're just saying, you know what? Didn't work before. I'm going to try something different. Embrace the chaos. Do you know what? It's happening, whether we like it or not. Think about how you can use the chaos, how you can use this to help you and be better than you are already. Don't worry about perfection, which is really hard for me as a perfectionist, but we have to move really quickly. We need to just get things out there, be honest with your employees. It might work, it might not work, sort of like the jump rope story I told you before. It didn't work, that's fine. Move on to something else. I think it's important to always balance short and long term. So even if I'm going to do some short little quick thing here, I always have my focus down the road and think about what's the impact of that. So even something, I was helping somebody with a survey for their furloughed employees. And I said, it's great to do the survey, but let's just think about what's going to be happening in the business. So if 2 weeks from now, you're going to have to make people redundant, do you really want to send the survey out now? So think about what are the consequences of what you're doing short term to the long term. I would love for people, the next tip, not to go back to the old ways. Some of the things that you guys are talking about that you've been trying, embrace them, continue to use them. Let's learn from what we're doing now and move it forward into this new world. And then some of you are back to work already, but if you're not thinking about already, think about what you're going to do moving forward, how you're going to adjust to this new world. So actually, that was it. I did it in 2 minutes over. That's not bad. I wanted to just share with you my email address. So if anybody has any questions whatsoever, I don't know if Glenn shared with you this website before, rebelplaybook.com. We've got some great examples of what companies are doing. Doesn't have to do with COVID-19, but a lot of it has to do with it. And then I've got some blogs on my website as well. So do we have time for a few questions, or what do you want to do, Neil? You're in charge.
Yeah, I think in the spirit of sort of respecting the time and stuff like that, we'll probably use, if anyone has got questions, to either fire them to me. They obviously got your email as well there. They want that. So we'll do that. Thank you so much, Deborah, for your time today, your wise words. It's so pertinent right now that we are so in touch with the importance of making sure that our employees are not only engaged, but they're actually communicated in a way that allows them to understand exactly what's happening in the business. That candor you're talking about is so important. Communication builds trust. I think that's absolutely key. And I think for all of us right now, doubling down on recognition and just making sure everybody takes some time out from today just to make a thank you note to somebody, I think is spot on. And the final thought is, and I think it's, well, you just said it, and Keith Farage has been saying it as well, is this notion not going back to work, but going forward to work. And it's such a prescient thought right now, is going forward. Let's make sure we grab hold of all these great ideas, these great behaviors that we've been witnessing over the last 8 weeks or so. And how do we make sure that we encapsulate those into the way we go forward back to work? So we really hold on to some of the things that great things we've been doing. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I know that'll be, everyone will give me a big virtual clap in terms of that. So you know, from around that, we normally have everyone standing up and hollering and stuff like that. Never quite the same, but I know everyone really appreciate that. We're here to learn. We're here by default. Just everyone's on the Masters program to accelerate the growth of their company, 10x themselves right now. So you've done that and more. So thanks once again so much, and thank you everyone for your attendance today. We will be sending in the follow-up the video recording that we've done for today, all the slides, all the links, all the contact details that you're going to need from that and more. So have a great weekend, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you.